So last week I addressed the latest controversy in the church about the new declaration Fiducia Supplicans, which, if you're looking for more reasons to become Catholic, we do have the best names for things, but that's an aside anyway. The declaration gave permission for priests to bless same-sex couples, which, as any reasonable person should have anticipated, has caused controversy, confusion, and even quite a bit of division. And as also should be expected, it has rattled the faith of more than a few people. I saw more than a few comments from people saying things like, I don't know how I can remain Catholic, or simply that they were declaring that they were leaving the church at this point. So I wanted to address that concern and respond to the question, am I going to remain Catholic, and should you remain Catholic at this point? But before I answer that question, I wanted to say a little bit more about the document in question, because there have been some developments since then, and a lot has been said, like a lot has been said since then. So I figured we might as well say some more. One thing that struck me about it was the timing. Like, think of everything that people are going through right now. Poverty, for example, is proliferating everywhere. I live in a very wealthy, developed part of the world, but there are homeless encampments propping up all over the place. It's an impossible to ignore symptom of where we're at as a society. And if people are economically desperate where I live, that means that they're probably starving where they used to just be economically desperate. As I don't need to remind anybody, we just came out of a pandemic that was exhausting for everyone. There are significant wars taking place that weren't before. Families are struggling economically. Many people are mourning the loss of loved ones who died in that pandemic, or are just part of the mysterious increase in mortality that is taking shape in our demographics now. And our healthcare systems, especially here in Canada, are strained and compromised to their limits. But this is the pastoral priority of the highest echelons of the church: the urgent need to make same-sex couples feel more included in spite of the countless provisions of inclusion that are already in place to anybody who wants to become Catholic. Like, if you thought that they were a special kind of victim oppressed class, I could see how you might want to address that problem and to work to alleviate it. But seriously, this is not 40 years ago. We're talking about people who now have their own category in every streaming service that you can get. And not because those categories are popular, but just because, you have to include that. We're talking about people who have a crosswalk emblazoned with their insignia at my city hall, along with their flag on the flagpole steps in front of City Hall. And when someone left a tire track on that crosswalk recently, there was a media campaign and a virtual manhunt for the perpetrators, which they eventually caught and were made an example of, publishing their pictures and their names in the newspaper, and I'm sure will be punished to the fullest extent of the law. But the fact that 4 more churches were set fire to and burnt down deliberately here in Alberta, Canada, where I live, in the weeks leading up to Christmas, in addition to the dozens of churches that were vandalized and set fire to in Canada over the past couple of years, we look at that and we're like, well, that shouldn't change the fact that faithful Christians are a privileged class who should probably redistribute some of that privilege to less privileged classes like our friends in the rainbow community. Christians are not some privileged oppressor class. If we were, you'd probably be aware that there's a literal genocide, and not the loosey-goosey kind of genocide and casual way we use that term just anywhere we feel like we want to object to some supposed injustice. An actual genocide is taking place in Nigeria, where estimates as high as 50,000 Christians have been killed because they're Christian. And I haven't seen any news coverage on that fact outside of a few Christian commentators. Today, every elementary school, every government agency, every major corporation flies the rainbow flag, often physically in front of their buildings, in large part out of fear of the repercussions if they don't do so. They are not some oppressed class in need of the Holy See to rescue and make feel included. They are the establishment. Now, a few of the self-styled Orthodox defenders of this particular instruction have celebrated the fact that Cardinal Fernandez, who is the prefect for the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, who is the architect of all of this this Christmas cheer, he gave an interview to The Pillar in which he explained that, according to the instruction, the couple is blessed, not the union. The couple, yes, the union, no. Which is either self-contradictory and he doesn't know it and therefore is woefully unqualified to be occupying that position in the church, or it's a phrase simply designed to create confusion. And as 1 Corinthians remind us, God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. And so too should his pastors who presume to represent him in some way. Because the word couple is describing two things as one thing. It's a way of taking a plurality and reducing it to a singularity. What do we call that when multiple things become one thing? A union. That's literally what the word union means. So if you're going to give such a disorienting and incoherent explanation, you're going to have to define your terms. What is specifically meant by union? What is specifically meant by couple? Which he refused to do, thus perpetuating the ongoing confusion, division, and drama in the church. And some people have argued, some respectable people, some people that I admire have argued that a couple doesn't always mean what you seem to insist that it does. Like, what about a dance couple? What about a couple of people who are paired up on a ski chairlift? Or the mere quantity of people in a geographical location? Like, I could say, I hosted a party last night, and you would say, whoa, how many people came? And I'd be like, there was a couple. What's the relationship of that couple? Well, they are the amount of people who came to my party. But notice that I've qualified every kind of couple I just described. At no point did I merely just say a couple. There's a point of reference for each one. I said a dance couple, a chairlift couple. How many people came to the party? A couple. And that's the only reason you know that they are distinct from the more common usage of that phrase. Because what if I was telling that story about my party in a different way to someone, and I said, a same-sex couple came to my party last night, because that's what the declaration describes, you would immediately know what is meant by a same-sex couple. That's not a mere quantity of individuals, and no sane person would treat it that way. It's a description of a relationship and the people in that relationship. And any attempt to direct attention towards said couple is attention given to the people and their relationship. And certainly a blessing is attention given towards them in some way. Therefore, the blessing is for the couple. And if you don't think so, imagine going out for lunch with a friend, and when the server greets you, they ask you, "Oh, how nice. Are you a same-sex couple?" Would you in your head go, "Well, we're the same sex, and there's two individuals here, so yes, as a matter of fact, we are a same-sex couple." Of course not. Of course not. Be honest, please. For the love of God, be honest. At the very least, if you're all about nuance and qualification, you'd ask for her to define her terms. But more likely than that, you would just say, no, we're just friends. Thanks for the intrusive question. Because everyone knows what that means, especially when you don't define it any other way. I could go survey pedestrians on the street and say, "Hey, what does a same-sex couple mean?" And they would answer how you would expect. They would say, two people of the same sex in an exclusive romantic, i.e. sexual relationship. I could ask ChatGPT what it is based on its crawling and gathering of whatever consensus it can find in our society. And you know what? I just did. It says a same-sex couple refers to a romantic couple or a marital relationship between two individuals of the same gender. Let me emphasize the words romantic, marital, and relationship. The word marital is in there because a romantic relationship is oriented towards or is an imitation of the monogamous commitments of a marriage, which is why from a Catholic anthropology, a same-sex couple is a nonsensical concept. It exists. It's a fictional construct attempting to portray something that doesn't exist. So when Fiducia Supplicans says that permission is granted for the blessing of same-sex couples, this is at best extremely confusing if you're trying to hold the orthodox line, or it's just incoherent and self-contradictory. And anyone saying it's not, At this point, I have to say you are sinning against charity, given the very legitimate distress and confusion this has caused. If you refuse to acknowledge the confusion that people are suffering from and will suffer from, you are neglecting the love you owe your neighbors in the body of Christ. Okay, so things are bad in the church right now. So let's return to the question, am I going to remain Catholic? And are you going to remain Catholic? And if so, why? Let me answer the first question by saying without any hesitation that yes, I am staying faithful to the Catholic Church, because while the new controversy produces a difficulty for my understanding of and my theories about the faith and the church, it doesn't produce any doubts. St. John Henry Newman is famous for saying that 10,000 difficulties do not make one doubt, because difficulties and doubts are a difference of kind and not of quantity. If you spent much time reading the New Testament, for example, you may have noticed that when the angel brought a message to our Blessed Mother that she was going to conceive miraculously, and when the angel told Zechariah that his wife Elizabeth would also conceive miraculously, they exemplified the distinction between difficulty and doubt by their reactions. Because Mary replied with a question, "How is this possible since I'm a virgin?" This news was a difficulty that exceeded her understanding, and so she asked a question. She didn't doubt, she wondered, how is this possible? Zechariah, on the other hand, expressed doubt. He demanded proof because he doubted the message of the angel, which, considering the messenger, seems like a pretty arrogant thing to do. And for that reason, Mary was given an explanation to help her understanding and help her faith, and Zechariah was disciplined by the angel. When a researcher hits a road bump in some experimentation or some research that they're doing, they continue working until they've resolved it with like a cohesive understanding. This is what you do when there's a difficulty. And there have been considerable difficulties in the history of the church. The Arian crisis, good and holy saints being persecuted and at sometimes executed by authorities in the church, like St. Joan of Arc. The Western Schism, in which there were multiple seemingly legitimate claimants to the throne of St. Peter. If you think that we have a bad pope right now, then that's a difficulty. But imagine having 2 or more bad popes all at once. And we can look at that history without nearly the amount of distress that we're bringing to our own current situation, our own context in history. Why? Because history resolved those difficulties. We're still living through ours. History will resolve this one too, but we just don't know how yet. Thus, it's a difficulty that we have to be patient as we live through it. And bad leadership in the church is nothing more than a difficulty. Should we be surprised? We know that the church is composed of and led by sinful, flawed human beings, but there is a difference between those who sin out of disregard or maybe even malice towards God and his commandments, and those who sin out of weakness in spite of sincere effort to please and honor God. So between those two kinds of sinfulness, how many bad bishops and clergy should we expect to find in the church according to the former description I gave, the one out of disregard or malice towards God? And if the Bible is any kind of a precedent, I'd say probably like 1 in 12 would be a pretty good estimate, because one of the 12 apostles was a traitor. He wasn't just acting out of weakness. He was a deliberate traitor. And 1 out of 12 can do a lot of damage. Obviously, it was enough in this particular case to get Jesus arrested and murdered, but in terms of like an organization, it's no less true. Imagine if soccer had 12 players instead of 11 players on the field, for example, and one of those players on your team was actively working against the interests of your team. Think about how much chaos and failure they could perpetuate if they tried to. Now imagine if that same player was promoted to captain because of the subtlety of their sabotage. Obviously, they could do a lot of damage that way. If the scandal of a bad pope is a reason for you to consider leaving the Catholic Church, let me just say that it shouldn't. And I'm not saying that our current Holy Father fits that description, because I'm not in any kind of official position to make that kind of judgment. But if that's the suspicion that is on your heart and on your mind, and it's causing you doubt about your affiliation in the Catholic Church, Let me say again, it shouldn't. We've had scandalously bad popes and bishops in the past, and if you're even faintly familiar with church history, you would know that. If that didn't compete with your fidelity to the church, neither should a currently reigning bad pope. I'd also point out that even though this new declaration gives us a disturbing glimpse into the minds of our leadership, they haven't explicitly defined any new heretical doctrine, at least as far as I can tell. The new declaration is mostly an instruction that gives permission to a practice of blessing couples who are not married. But it also says this doesn't legitimize those unions in any way. So it's an attempt to preserve the doctrine while sacrificing practice, which is bad. But it's not the promulgation of a heretical doctrine. Another reason that I'm sticking with my Catholic faith, and this is arguably the most important reason, is because Catholicism and my faith aren't merely theories about certain ideas, such that the presentation of other ideas would have the potential to dislodge me from my practice of my faith. Ideas and reasons certainly are a part of it, but it isn't merely that. It's mostly an encounter with the living God who has given me dimensions of life that I never could have imagined prior to my becoming a Catholic Christian. I've experienced profound infusions of grace, and I've also neglected my relationship with God at times and found that the effects of both of those differences are measurable and unambiguous. I know what it's like to be in a habit of practicing prayer, study, and the life of the sacraments, and what a boon to my soul that pattern is. And I also know what it's like to fall off that wagon and to suffer for it. Furthermore, I'm deeply integrated into a body and a community of people that I wouldn't trade for the world. The goodness of these people and the friendships inspires a whole array of confidence that this is where I should be, and this is what I should be doing in the world. I am part of a body. I'm not merely a passenger on it like a flea or a parasite. If I was so easily removed from that body, then I would have to admit that that's all I ever was, just like a parasite. But I'm actually an organ or a part of that body. You would have to amputate me in order for my relationship with that body to end. If your faith is such that it's so easy for you to leave the church because of just a difficulty of ideas, then your faith was probably nothing more than mere ideas that could be just debated on the internet in the first place. And that's not what it means to be a member of the church. And don't mistake what I'm saying here. I'm not saying the truth doesn't matter. It absolutely does. But how you arrive at the truth isn't merely just through cerebral speculation. It's found in the confirmation or the discouragement of your experiences. And your experience of the life of faith should inform your obedience or your lack of as much as anything else. Because you and I are very capable, even likely to make logical mistakes. We can be deceived, we can be confused, or be too lazy to even do the investigation that is necessary to arrive at the truth. So a mere difficulty of ideas is something that you can work through rather than simply throwing in the towel and jumping ship. And I'm sorry to say this, but that's what cowards do. And this is not a time for cowards. This is a time in which the church is under siege, and we need our best people to fight for her. That's what I intend to do. Because I love the church, and I don't just love her because of the way she makes me feel good at times or because of the benefit that I derive from her. I love her because she is Christ's body, and that love is owed. I believe that the church needs me, and I bet it needs you too. It needs us to be faithful witnesses and to participate in our Lord's ongoing efforts to clean house and bear witness to the truth of his gospel. If you're a Catholic who is a leader in your profession and you're like me, you've probably had some desire for more opportunities to network with other Catholic professional leaders in order to help each other grow professionally, spiritually, and economically. Because this is exactly what we're doing with Fisher's Network. We're mobilizing Catholic professionals and economic leaders into local crews so that they can better support one another in the hopes of building up something like a local Catholic economy. As they do so, they can better support their parish in a variety of ways. Imagine as a parish having a group of experts you can turn to for advice and support on business decisions that have to be made. This is why pastors participate in our crews as well. They get business mentorship while having the opportunity to build up leaders in their community. So if this sounds like a way to strengthen your local Catholic community or parish, consider becoming a member by visiting fishersnetwork.com.